That's no moon. It's a space station.
Hey guys, welcome back to the show. So we are just going to dive straight in today, and we actually have two guests joining us that are going to be speaking at the Mind Nexus conference in Tucson, Arizona, September 27th through the 29th, which Aaron and I are both going to be presenting at as well, along with many others such as Carrie Cassidy, John D'Souza. There's a great lineup. Dr. Alex Bloom, many of you may know who he is. Desiree Foley is actually the host of the conference, and we had her on the show, episode 22. So welcome back to the show, Desiree. But it was, man, that was like 4 years ago, four and a half
Oh,
years
yeah.
ago.
About 5 years ago now.
Yeah.
And
it was when you first started.
yeah,
Yep.
so and we interviewed you as you came on as a targeted individual, and you shared a lot of the stuff that has happened to you over the years, and you had like a stack of documents to prove it, which was substantial, and it's actually crucial moving forward because people need the evidence. We can tell the stories all day long, and we're also joined by Jesse Beltran, who is an expert on the Havana Syndrome, among many other things, this weaponized frequencies and the bioweapons and all that. And he's a wealth of knowledge. I watched a few of his interviews, and it's incredible stuff. So I'm excited to dive in. And it's not just like I said, you're not just sharing that this is happening. You're providing evidence, and it's being recognized by Congress and the Homeland Security, and it's nothing to turn your head to anymore. It's starting. We have to start taking this seriously because it's being used against us civilians, unbeknownst to us. So. It's an extremely important subject, and we're excited to be here. So, welcome to the show, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Great to have you
be
guys.
here.
So, Desiree, why don't you tell us a little bit about this conference first, and
And then we'll dive into it.
Yeah, a little bit about yourself if you want to, because I mean, the conference, all of this information and the targeting is what inspired the conference, right? We need to get this out there, and you guys have put together an amazing lineup. So maybe you can let our audience know how they can find the conference and where they can purchase tickets and just a little bit about it.
Okay, so it's going to be in Tucson, Arizona, September 27th through the 29th. And you would just have to go to mindnexuslive.com, and then we'll put a link in the comments after the show. And we have some amazing speakers. We have like Tyler already stated, Carrie Cassidy, Dr. Bloom. We actually have, which I'm really excited about, is Dr. Rima LeBeau, which if you guys don't know, she was married to a major, General Major Sobelbein, who was in charge of Project Stargate. So she has some amazing stories. If you get to like talk to her, it's like super amazing. Ben from Ezra Wonder will be there, and
Dr. John Hall,
Dr. Jamal, and I'm drawing a blank here. That's about it, right?
we have other speakers that
just go to
are
our
experts in
website.
spiritualism. Go to
Yeah.
our website; you'll be able to see them. It's a huge lineup.
Yeah, just go to our website. We're gonna have it 3 days, and then Saturday we're gonna have a DJ, dinners included in the ticket. It's a really amazing lineup. You should definitely check it out.
I
Yeah,
just want to say it is an amazing lineup. I was very impressed. I'm like, wow, Carrie Cassidy, John D'Souza, Alex Bloom, Jen and Brian Berryhill, Ben Chastain. It's phenomenal lineup. So it's going to be well worth the time.
And us. We're excited.
And
if you like
you
us, we're there.
Yeah, forget about you guys.
Right.
Desiree and you, Jesse. You
Yeah,
guys,
all of us, Jesse and Desiree, and
it's an all-star lineup.
It is, and Aaron and I will actually be presenting separately, not together. So it's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm excited. I'm putting together my presentation now, but let's dive into the meat of the subject today. So, Jesse, I know you're an expert on the Havana Syndrome, but it's so much more than that. It's the targeting and the voice of God technology. You can call it voice to skull, whatever. It's weaponized frequencies that are being utilized to mind control the entire population, and not just mind control, but silence and neutralize people, especially like national security agents and stuff like that. People who are a threat to whatever the agenda might be in the moment. So for those who don't know, maybe you could give us a brief run through of what the Havana Syndrome is and how they're even targeting people with this technology.
Perfect. I'd be more than happy to. Just give your audience a little bit about my background. As you stated, my name is Jesse Beltran. I'm a retired firefighter paramedic from the city of Sacramento. I helped establish the paramedic transportation programs for the city of Elk Grove and the city of Sacramento back in the early days. I was also the president of an organization called the International Center Against the Abuse of Covert Technologies. I was one of the co-founders along with Lars Drugard and in its infancy, a gentleman by the name of Peter Rosenhall. I've later I'm a certified master hypnotherapist with a diploma in hypnotherapy, and I currently have my own practice. But to delve into what Havana Syndrome is, in its infancy, what most of your viewers or you may have heard or not heard the term called targeted individuals. When I established the International Center Against the Abuse of Covert Technologies, the reason it was created was because I happened to meet Dr. John Hall after speaking with a gentleman by the name of James Walbert, who was successful in obtaining a restraining order to the court systems because he had a non-consensual implant put in him. He believes it was done because they were trying to steal an invention, the secrets to his invention, and that was the ultimate reason why he believed it happened. He obtained medical imagery, he obtained toxicology reports. All these have substantiated it was enough that the judge believed him and issued a protective order for him. In speaking to James Walbert, he turned me to speak to Dr. John Hall. And I met Dr. John Hall in Texas, and he explained to me this phenomenon that was happening. And the phenomenon is there were people complaining of being harassed, targeted, people who felt that they were being targeted out for specific reasons. And what John was doing in the embassy, he was doing what was called an RF scan, but he did it very sporadically with these individuals. And so my conversation with him was, why isn't anything been done about it? That is just a natural common sense question. And what he explained to me is that what was happening is because people are taught to go to their physician whenever they have any type of anomalies, you go and tell your doctor everything. And because of the type of symptoms that go along with this, most of them get railroaded into the mental health industry. And it's the worst thing possible for them. They're just getting re-victimized. So what I decided to do was do it on a mass scale. I started in Sacramento, California. Our first meeting, to my surprise, had about 100 people show up. And they all had the same complaints. And it was almost cookie cutter. And so I thought that was odd. And not the fact that it was 100 people there, but they all had the same complaint. So we started doing these RF scanning on a mass scale. We did surveys so that we can get a little bit about the background, why they thought that was happening to them, how long they've been suffering with it. And it began to take hold. Then we had another meeting over in Davis, California, the University of California, Davis, and 300 people showed up at that event. And I knew I was onto something. And so we continued to do this process on the West Coast. And what was striking is initially when we were getting the data back, predominantly it was happening to Caucasians, specifically Caucasian women who were either recently single, divorced, or widowed. They were highly educated. And then the statistics start to go to white males, Caucasian males, then African American females, African American males, Asians, and then it dwindled down in race as we began to obtain the data. Went to the Midwest, Same phenomenon was happening there, predominantly happening to Caucasians. Um, and it fell in the same categories of ethnicity as far as the numbers. So I'm going, well, is this an attack on Caucasian races for whatever reason, Caucasians and African Americans? So when we went to Chicago and started going towards the East Coast, we began to see a flip, a minor flip. And the flip is that in Chicago and towards the East Coast, what was happening to majority of African American females, then African American males, then Caucasian females, and but everything else stayed consistent. And that went all the way to the shores of the East Coast, with one exception. I was invited to Virginia by a group of folks to come and speak to them and do some RF scanning. And this was very different from what we were used to seeing. This group was all military subcontractors. And I found it to be odd. But so your audience knows I have been doing this for over a decade, and I have been involved in hypnosis since 2000 and became certified in 2014 for a reason. And the reason was I began to see something. There were categories of people who were affected severely, moderately, and then those who you would say to low to moderate in severity. The ones who were severely affected, I realized were very, or what we would consider having high suggestibility. And why is that important? Well, the phenomenon is real. And recently, within a month or so ago, the Department of Homeland Security uh, listened to sworn testimony by 3 experts. One of them was a lieutenant colonel, retired. Uh, uh, Edgren was his name. And that's important because this was someone in our military who fought for victims. He fought for federal employees, mainly our soldiers. And he was seeing this phenomenon happening, and they testified and gave what they could that wasn't classified. And I created a video, and I don't know if Tyler, maybe you can provide it to your guests at a later time so they can take a look at it. It's important because we now know that this phenomenon is real and true. So let me go back to the soldiers, the military subcontractors. So I started doing something different with these conferences that I was having and being invited to. I started to open up with asking people if they felt that they were highly suggestible, have everyone raise their hand. Obviously, in this subgroup, no one raised their hand. If I said you were not suggestible, raise your hand. And almost everyone, with the exception of a couple, I think they were just a little shy, raised their hand. And I did something. I wanted to show the fact that these individuals, if you are highly suggestible, you can be covertly manipulated uh, without even knowing it, just by having a normal conversation with someone if they really know what they're doing. And I'm an expert on suggestibility. That's why I'm a hypnotherapist. Uh, and so I asked this gentleman to come up. Good looking guy, fit. He was 6'6", 6'5", right in there, African American. And him and I just began to have a chat. And he had his hands closed. And by the time we were done with our conversation, I asked, "Can you please pull your hands apart?" And the harder he tried, he couldn't. And he kept fighting. And everyone in the room became shocked. They're like, "What's going on? Why can't you pull your hands apart?" And he started to have a little anxiety. So I didn't, that was not my intention. So what I did is I just go sleep. It was that simple. And then we started to give him positive affirmations, to help him with this. And now that you understand you might be highly suggestible, it's the first part of defending yourself and so forth. And then we brought him back and you ask him, now what do you think? And he goes, "Well, I have to say I'm highly suggestible." But I continued to follow up with him a few times just to make sure that we were on the right path. And he was having issues at work, relationship issues, uh, started to have little onsets of paranoia and things like that. But after he was made aware of this, his life became more towards the normal side. Okay. Now, why do I bring this up? Prior to that, I was contacted by two people. The names Aaron Alexis and Myron May might ring a bell to some people. Aaron Alexis ended up shooting 16 people at the Navy Yard on the East Coast, and Myron ended up shooting people at the university in the research department. These two contacted me prior to them doing these horrific atrocities. And when they spoke to me, they were asking for help. And I began to explain to them that I believe what they're going through is that they believe it's real. And I said there was no quick fix. This is going to be a journey. They were very impatient. And the problem with when someone is on the initial onset, uh, having the symptoms, and I'll explain what those symptoms are here in a second, they either take two modalities: either it's fight or you fly, or fright. These two guys were very determined, and I can hear it in their voice. They were very impatient. I had no clue that they were going to go and do what they did. Okay. So this is why I think it's important to teach the general population that, number one, education is the first line of defense. Okay. So what are these guys experiencing? The Havana Syndrome, according to governmental reports, was first recognized in 2014 by our diplomats and some of their family members that were working for our embassy over in Cuba. And the symptoms that they were having is they were hearing these strange sounds. They were getting nausea, vertigo, unusual headaches, shocks to their extremities, unusual muscle movements, and brain fog. And eventually, initially, the United States didn't accept it as real. They thought it was some type of group psychological phenomenon. And then what happened is started happening to our to diplomats in Canada and agents. And so Canada was a little bit more um, forthcoming for those individuals because they believed them, and they started to provide them with resources and work comp and things like that. And then the United States jumped on the bandwagon, and and here we are today. So what was unusual with the, I'm going to say ISA Act, which represents the International Center Against the Abuse of Covert Technologies, my whole purpose of that organization was just to get the data. So what I use is what we call SOAP notes. Subjective data is what people complain about. Objective data is what we can physically see, we can test for, whether it be RF scanning, medical imagery, toxicology reports, anything like that, anything that you can concretely see and measure. And then you assess the two and you come up with a plan. And we had a protocol that we followed with everyone. We would do the RF scanning first, a preliminary scan. If there were any results there, then we would encourage them to get medical imagery or studies, whatever they can. I tell them, and I'll give some advice to people if they think this is happening, is you need to be very conservative on how you explain this to medical personnel. Most are not briefed about this. And hence, this is our mission. We want to get to the general population. Now that at least the government is saying, well, it is happening to some federal employees and some of their family members. But the bottom line is that we have databases of literally hundreds, if not thousands, of victims, not only here in the United States, but throughout the world.
Right.
So, yeah. So I was invited by people in government in other countries to come and bring people who I thought might be victims. And they wanted me to test people who were related in the embassies or work for the embassies and so forth. So we used controls there. We took people who weren't victims, and then we took people who we knew were victims and who came up positive on RF scans. And I had to sign an NDA, and they took me to this non-disclosed location that had what is called an anechoic chamber. And an anechoic chamber is basically a very robust Faraday cage. It blocks out huge frequency spectrums from coming into that environment. And what we did is we took those victims into that environment, and to our surprise, is those from the United States came up with similar frequencies, positive inside the anechoic chamber. Those who were in Europe came up with similar frequencies that were different from the U.S., Russia, and the same thing happened from other countries. So this was a fascinating finding, and I believe you have a copy of our phase 3 report. That's the final phase of our testing, and I do have that. I gave that to you in that file, Tyler.
Mhm.
And so when we came back to the United States with this data, what was happening here is that there was an organization called the Bioethics Commission that was put together under President Obama. And they were giving a conference on this phenomenon. They were doing a hearing on this phenomenon. And literally hundreds of victims, not only the ones that I had tested, but just hundreds showed up at that to give testimony. And Amy Gutman was the head chair at the time. And she's now, I believe, and I misquoted in my last show, I thought she was an ambassador to Belgium, but she's actually our U.S. ambassador to Germany at the EU. And they basically were told that this is a hysteria phenomenon, and you're just going to have to live with it.
Of course.
Then so I was invited to another presidential bioethics commission in San Francisco at the university teaching hospital there. And I was in the front row. CBS, ABC, all the big networks were there. And I was allowed to ask a question initially. And I had my assistant there, and I wrote a question. They took a break, and I was supposed to be the next question that was going to be asked. And I'm going to step back. Now, Amy Gutman and this Bioethics Commission, it's important that people understand what their agenda. They were talking about genetics, and their forum there was to genetically map every living organism on the planet, including you. And they wanted rights to that information. And so when it comes to control, if you think about the implications of this, what happens if they have a patent on your DNA? What are the implications there? My sense is that you're probably going to lose autonomy over the decisions that you get to make about what happens to you.
Mhm.
Now, the statement that was made there, and this was by Amy Gutman, is that they believe this through and through, that they are the only ones, they are the top 1% of the elite 1% that should be making decisions about what's best for you.
Wait,
This is their mentality.
who's
This is their mentality.
Who's they? When you say they're the people at this conference?
Correct. The Bioethics Commission. The Bioethics Commission. Everyone's there. What was interesting, you even had military personnel on this commission there. So anyway, what ended up happening, my assistant gave the question, and then I was prepared to hear what that was, the answers were going to be. They completely brushed me off. They censored it and didn't allow it. So I'll share with your listeners what that question was. And the question was, we understand the importance of your experimentation, but what safeguards are you putting aside for when your experimentation goes wrong for the victims? And that's the question that was censored. Okay. So where are we today? Interesting enough, in the testimony that was given with the Department of Homeland Security, with Lieutenant Colonel Begrin, he describes what Havana Syndrome is. He describes it as it's some type of EMP weapon, a signal so forth. But it's being aimed at specific people, and they say it's happening to the elite of the elite of their employees. They're CIA agents, they're FBI agents, they're those in the U.S. Embassy. And in addition, what he says the whole purpose, if this is they also mentioned that people have died from this. Okay, I can confirm that dozens of people have been murdered this way, and usually what happens is they end up committing suicide. Now, Lieutenant Colonel Egren testified that this is a slow kill. And most of the time, he says, it's made to make a person look like they're crazy.
Yep.
Mhm.
So I'll take that back to the statistics that we gathered. Now, what we found that probably most of this was experimentation, but it wasn't always the case. There were whistleblowers that were targeted. There were people who offended people in great positions of power who were targeted. So it runs the gamut. And I hope that explains what Havana Syndrome is and where we are today.
Yeah, so I mean that was an incredibly thorough explanation, and there's a million questions that come to mind. Desiree, I'm not trying to leave you out of this. I know you said you just wanted to sit back, but because I know Desiree has actually experienced, she's been at the receiving end of a lot of these attacks, as so have I. And I even have questions about some things that have happened to me over the years. But so whenever you RF scan somebody, can that also can you explain exactly what you're doing? And that can that also detect a source of where this frequency is coming from?
Okay, good question. So what we use is in the preliminary environment is what is called a JM20 Pro. It's a frequency detector, and what's very unique about it is you can calibrate it. So when you put the wand around a signal, you can literally have to be within an inch or two of the emission. So why is that important? Because we live in a wireless society, so we get RF signals from everywhere all the time. So the reason that's important, because you can calibrate it down so that we can say, well, this is not an aberrant signal coming from somewhere else, because we know that the calibration is such that we have to be within an inch or two of the emission. Now, when you scan someone, what will happen is uh, we'll have a map and we go into this blind. We don't want to know anything that's happening with the person. We don't want to know where they believe they're having issues. We don't want to know anything. We just go in completely blank. And then if it does pick up an emission, then we'll just mark that and we'll make notations. And then we'll come back with a frequency counter to see if we can get a frequency, numerical frequency. And that's typically how it's done.
Yeah, you
Now,
scanned me. Can you give the details of when you scanned me? This
yeah,
would be my
we
second scan. I had another scan, which I've told you guys about, and then Jesse scanned me too.
right. So I'll get to that, Desiree, because it's important that we talk about the types of scanning
Oh yeah,
that
for
is
sure.
available. Yeah.
I would also like to cover the implants as well.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And ultimately, this is what we're getting to. So, so there's the preliminary scan with the JM20 Pro, and so that's one mechanism. You can't say someone's implanted just because they come up positive on an RF scan. Okay, you need more anecdotal evidence, whether it's in medical imagery, whether in toxicology reports, or what I like to see done is using a non-linear junction scan done after that process. And the reason is sometimes, and we'll talk about the implants here in a second, you can have an active implant, and that's something that's transmitting 24/7, 365 days a year. It doesn't stop. And then you have passive technology. Now, what the nonlinear junction scan does, it will send out a resonant frequency to a passive uh, technology that has ferrous material in it. And this is what it bounces off of. So it'll send the first echo, the echo will come back and it says, oh, there might be something there. Send another one, comes back, oh, confirms there is something there. And it'll send a third one. And then that's the ultimate verification that there is a passive device. But what this does, it activates the passive device so that you can get that detection and the location of where that is. Um, so Desiree has had both. And if you look at her reports, what was really intriguing is number one, the individual, the qualifications that he did. I guess my understanding is that there are very few people with this certification. He did this for the military, right? Correct, Desiree?
Yeah. Yeah, he
Yep.
was he got certified by a general.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And 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 so this is why I say it's important. So what were we finding? We have cases now where they are removing uh, implants. And these implants um, can cause a lot of havoc throughout the human body. And what they're finding is these things are so small today that you can put it up to the date on a penny, and they're literally the size of one of the numbers on the date and even smaller. Okay. You have a case of David Larson down in Southern California who was a politician and he was having these exact same symptoms and ended up having surgery and had multiple implants removed, over 10. And I believe you also have that report. And you can show your audiences the size of these implants that were being pulled out. Now, Dave sued and he lost. And the reason he lost is because the judge says that he gave permission to participate in an experiment. And he did. But the problem is he didn't have full disclosure. And this is what happens very often is that when people participate in experimental testing or procedures, is that they are not given full disclosure. And it is my opinion that if you don't get full disclosure and it's only partial disclosure, is because the intent is to deceive.
Exactly.
Right.
You have to, yeah, you have to give an individual 100% of the information as to what is going to be done, what what they might be risking, and what they might be giving up in their lives.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I know in Dave Larson's case, if he knew, he would never have consented to this.
They would never sign up. It's
Right.
called
Correct.
lying by omission. It's
Correct.
deceiving by
Yeah.
omission. Yes.
So
Yeah.
so how are these implants being implanted? Do they all show up on medical imagery, or are some undetectable? I mean, are we talking about nanotech that can be consumed through a drink? Is this being done while people are sleeping? You know, somebody coming into your house and implanting. You know, it's a serious matter, and I'm sure that has happened before. But I think they have sophisticated technology today where they can eliminate the process of being, you know, they can eliminate the person, the individual, and there's other means of transmission, right?
Mm. Correct. Correct. Um,
Let me
so
answer
to
this
answer
one. Let me answer.
okay,
Maybe you
go
can
ahead.
answer it. Okay.
Go.
So, how to get the nano inside your body? There's several different ways, but I'm going to tell you a couple of ways that it was done to myself. My doctor, who's a toxicologist, had asked me to put some cotton balls into my air ducts. And I did that. I put them in my air ducts and I left them there for 24 hours. And then I send them off to her. And she said they tested positive for nanotechnology and that they are putting it in through my air ducts and I'm actually breathing it in. And another way too is dental work. That's a big, big, big way that they get it into you. And it's usually, I don't know if anyone had dental work and then you wake up and you're like, you weren't supposed to be asleep and you were slept for the whole procedure. I mean, that happens too. I don't know if you want to add to that, Jesse.
Well, what I can speak on is what I do know. We are seeing a lot of these victims coming up positive in the TMJ area. TMJ is the temporal mandibular joint, which is basically the jaw area. When you do
Wow.
go to a dentist, how many times do you get the needle way back in that corner? And there's a void. It's a perfect place to put something, right? That's one way.
Can I stop you really quick? So I
Yeah,
have
go ahead.
in that specific area, um, I'll be walking sometimes and I'll receive a pain that's crippling. And it shows up here and in my wrist at the same exact time, and it'll literally stop me in my tracks. And I've been trying to figure out for years what it is, if it's something natural or not. So you just kind of confirmed to me that it's possibly something going on right here for me in this specific area. But continue.
Yeah. So there are a lot of you have the trigeminal nerve endings that are in this region, and you got your cervical spine, your shoulder. So a lot of those nerves are connected. It is interesting that you're getting both at the same time from the jaw and the hand. So depending on the tech and the year it was made, um, really depends on whether or not you are going to be successful with medical imagery. Okay. And the reason I say this is the if you were implanted or earlier, like in the from the 50s on to around 2000, you probably have the older tech, and those can be seen. There's a gentleman by the name of Bob Boyce, who was an inventor I speak about. He had terminal cancer. They found a chip in the tumor. This was done by his business partner. He was drugged, knocked out for a few days, and woke up, didn't know what happened, but he ended up developing cancer. His name was Bob Boyce. And when I spoke to him, he just succumbed. He goes, look, he goes, Jesse, I was just succumbing to dying from this cancer. But he was in a Faraday cage testing his inventions, and the wand accidentally passed by his shoulder and it pinged. So basically, it was a frequency detector, just like we use in the preliminary scans. And so thought it was odd, got an x-ray in the tumor. There was an RFID chip, and you have images of that in the files that I've sent you. And they removed it. His cancer subsided and thought he was okay. And then it came back aggressively. Ended up, bottom, bottom line is he ended up rescanning himself in the Faraday cage, found another device. They removed that. And I forgot to mention the first time when the chip was sent to pathology, it disappeared. So the second time they were a little smarter. They used chain of custody. They found the serial number on the device, and then they traced it back to an NSA database. When they tried to sue to get more information, they were stonewalled and said it was a matter of national security. So they died there. But the bottom line is Bob Boyce's business partner was a former NSA employee, and that's who did that in Bob's case. But you could definitely see what the older microchips look like today, which are similar to the Dave Larson size. They are much smaller than that. And there was a college friend of my wife's when I was up there in Virginia with the military subcontractors. He invited us over to see him, and he was wondering what we were doing there. And I briefly told him what we were doing, didn't tell him everything. And then he said, well, I can tell you exactly what years, depending on the chip, we can tell you what year these were being done.
Hmm.
But he says now, if it's done to you, your SOL, in other words, because they're so small that medical imagery isn't going to detect it. So why do I mention this? Is because the only thing that's going to detect this is using something out of the medical spectrum where you have these RF detectors or these nonlinear junction detectors, which are very expensive. They're about $30,000 today, but it's very beneficial. What I do want to mention to everyone is initially there were two fields of belief. The one is that this is a frequency that's being emitted and it's aimed at these individuals. And I want you to use some common sense here. what type of resource would it take to make sure that you're constantly aiming something at an individual 24/7, 365 days a year? It's not feasible. So this is how we came to this theory and this common sense approach, and why we wanted to do the mass testing so we can get more data to take it from subjective to objectivity, because we now have numbers. So these individuals who are being targeted and singled out, we said this, we said, okay, if it is a frequency where a lot of these people are saying they believe it's some type of signal being directed at them, then you have to have a mechanism to receive it. And the mechanism are these implants. And so what I wonder is, because we started testing the general population, and the general populations were coming up positive in a different way. They were coming up positive where they've had a vaccination, or maybe they had a surgery, and in that surgery area was coming up positive.
Talk about the
So that was
military people that you.
that's what I was saying.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And then there's another group that was the military. Now, the military individuals, you can superimpose their reports over each other, and they're all implanted in the same locations. Or
Wow.
I don't want to use the word implanted. Let me rephrase this. They all came up positive in the RF detection in the same location, is what I want to say.
So, okay, there's so much here. First of all, the cancer causing part of it do you think did this guy have cancer before the chip, or did the chip or the implant cause the cancer? Do you think this could be it was the cause of the cancer?
He believes it was the cause of the cancer.
Okay.
I suspect it was the cause of the cancer. There are studies out there on animals that these chips do give them a higher propensity for developing tumors.
So could somebody who has just a lot of heavy metals in their body, could they also be affected by the frequency, or does it have to be a specific implant? Do you think just where the chemtrails, let's just say, are playing a part in this for the entire population?
I can't come to a conclusion based on that. What I can say this is, for whatever reason, in a lot of these victims who have had implants removed do have a high toxicology report with regards to specific metals.
Right.
So, because one of the obvious elephant in the room questions is, why are they doing this? What is their end game here? Are they just messing with people to mess with them, or do they have a specific agenda in mind of why they're doing this? And what is the end game with that? What are they trying to steer humanity towards with doing all this, do you think?
Okay. Well, that is a great question, because there are so many possibilities. If you listen to Lieutenant Colonel Egren, he says that one objective is to make a person look crazy. Okay. He testified that in front of Congress under sworn testimony. And he also says, put me in a skiff and I'll tell you who you need to subpoena. I'll tell you where you need to look.
Yeah,
And I'll tell you who you need to go after. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's one mechanism. The other mechanism, if you recall, they testify that they're going after their elite of the elite. They're going at their best soldiers. They're going at their best agents. They're going after their best people. So that probably, they believe, is probably a foreign agent. Okay. Agency that's doing this. I can also tell you that we have the technology. There's a gentleman by the name of Igor Smirnov, and I don't know if you've heard of the name before, but he was a Russian physicist, and he developed it. In fact, you have a video there that I sent you in the file. What he developed. He developed a technology that can send messages to your brain remotely. And he says it bypasses the conscious mind and goes directly into the subconscious.
Right.
And you would believe it was God, and there's nothing you can do against it. Yeah. I have a different philosophy about that. I believe that we can develop a firewall for our mind. But education is the first step. Interestingly enough, the United States, after he passed away, his wife was awarded a contract to through the United States, almost $1 billion. It was over $900 million. And the company was SRS, if I recall. And so the United States had gave funding to obtain this technology. In fact, they kind of screwed up at Waco. They were going to use this and send the voice of God to Koresh, but they didn't know how to use it. Then they screwed up, and it turned into a disaster there. And so these weapons do exist. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've, when we did our research on the voice of God technology, all of the school shootings, almost all of them, every single case, the shooter said that God told them to do it, or some entity, some voice told them to do it.
And they were all on medications,
yes,
drugs, where it was making them much more susceptible to that technology.
Correct. Yeah.
Well,
if your mind is in an altered state and you are highly suggestible, just imagine what you could do. You can get a person to do anything and not remember.
right.
Now, if you're making them, if they're religious and you want to manipulate them, then you make them believe that they're talking to God. You can do all sorts of things, and this is why it was important for me to understand and get certified as a hypnotherapist, because it allowed me to understand suggestibility, even though I was doing hypnosis for quite some time, but understand suggestibility at a level and to recognize those individuals who were highly suggestible and who would have the tendencies to fall under that circumstance. And this is why I really seek out those who are highly suggestible, who claim that they are going through this experience, because that's where the attention needs to be drawn to initially. But every one of these persons who are going through this is suffering. They are being tortured 365 days a year. And this is why we're doing what we're doing. Desiree and I decided, I've known Desiree for about 10 years now. And it was through this data gathering process that I was going through with ISAC, is how I met her. And it's important that we teach the general population. And right now, the environment is right. With the advent of the Homeland Security and our government saying, yes, this phenomenon is happening, although they're only saying it's happening to federal employees. They're not admitting, they're not admitting that it's happening to civilians, but it is. And they're saying the first event was in 2014. I can tell you 100% that in 2009, at least we were documenting that. And I know of some cases as early as 2004. So
Yeah, and there's things the CIA was using a long time ago, like the heart attack gun. And one of the symptoms of this technology, of this weaponized frequency, is it can give you heart attack symptoms, if not give you a heart attack. And I've experienced that myself. And one of the things I heard you mention earlier was electric shocks. Now, this is something personal to me because I've suffered from this. Depending on this situation, what I'm doing, who I'm with, as I'm falling asleep, it'll feel like my entire system is shocked, like I'm being electrocuted, and it just like it fries my nervous system, right? And it'll happen all night. As soon as I'm about to fall asleep, it's like somebody's sitting there with a button, and it only happens whenever they're trying to stop me from, let's just say, enjoy the experience or of where I'm at. It typically happens like on a trip when I'm trying to go do some spiritual work or whatever. They really fuck with my vibe and my frequency to the point where I don't sleep, and it's just a chain reaction after that. So to me, after listening to you, that would tell me that I'm sure there's something. I have implants. that are being somehow activated. I mean, I don't know. I'm not trying to play the victim to this, but it's something that has actually caused me a lot of problems.
Yeah. Well, the electric shocks is a key thing. Uh, Obviously, we are electrical beings. Our whole, uh, you know, neurology is all based on electricity and nerve endings. And so, if you have, that's why if you take a 9-volt battery, you put it to your tongue, you feel that.
Right.
Now imagine you have an implant which functions off of RF signals, which creates a voltage. Um, that is off. That can most definitely interfere with your neurology, and you'll get these electric shocks, twitches, movements that you don't normally get. Now, I have to caution everyone. I'm not a doctor. Um, I'm not a psychologist. I'm a hypnotherapist. I do work in conjunction with psychologists and psychiatrists because I do have to partner up with them in certain cases. But uh, there could be some medical explanations for those type of things. But in this environment, if you're coming up with positive on an RF scan, it kind of want to makes you go in a different direction. It's probably not a disease process, is what I'm getting at.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So Desiree, do you want to add to any of this? I know you've had a number of implants identified. Have you had any of them removed?
Oh, I wish.
Oh,
No, I got scanned with um I would say 2018 I was scanned and came up with showing at least 6 different devices in the body that was emitting a signal. They were able to capture that frequency, and also my doctor was able to identify who owns the license to that frequency. Um, I think you like have to have money to get it taken out, and then I know my doctor said that some other doctors were taking them out, and then they were losing their license to do surgeries because they were going after their license because they said you didn't put it there, so you're not allowed to take it out. It's not your property.
hmm.
So now, like, I would love to get him taken out. Like, I'm kind of just like, waiting for a doctor to say, hey, yeah, yes, I'll take it out. I know several people that have taken it out, and so Jesse had given you some documents. You should, if you can, put those documents so everybody can see what they look like, and it's real evidence. Um, and then again, I got scanned again. I would say, was it like 4 months ago, Jesse, when you scanned me?
Mm-hmm.
Was it like 4 months ago he scanned
Yeah.
me? And it was showing mostly, right here and some in the back, right here in the back of the neck. And it pretty much matched up with the other test that I took. But
Right. And I want to bring something up. Aaron, were you going to say something?
no, that was pretty much it.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, and your story is it was your ex-husband that was it CIA that he was connected to, or was it DOD, or I forget which intelligence agency?
Well, okay. So
I mean, if you want to go into that.
yeah, no,
Okay.
I'll touch on it a little bit. Okay, so I'm not 100% positive it's him. There's always that 1% that it's not him.
Mm-hmm.
But I can say that it started happening while I was going through a divorce. That's when all the weird stuff started happening to me. And he was a aerospace engineer for Raytheon.
Mm.
And he, who was in charge of the military sector of Raytheon. So, I mean, put 2 and 2 together, but again, I'm not 100% positive. Deep down in my heart, I believe it was him, but again, I could still be wrong.
Right. Now,
Mm-hmm.
interesting that you say Raytheon because I think Eric Hecker talks about the Havana Syndrome being directly tied to Raytheon and the technology that they're using that
Well, there you go.
that he witnessed in Antarctica. So there's a connection there. But also what you mentioned earlier, as far as you said a majority of victims were Caucasian females, specifically widowed, divorced, single. So why do you think that is? Now, is this just like an off-the-shelf technology where these guys just want to, fuck with their ex because they're trying to get revenge? Do you think they could be doing it just simply out of spite, or are there other deeper reasons for that?
Yeah. I can't be in the brain of the perpetrators that are doing this, but what I can say is this. There is a timeline methodology that happens. When the person is first exposed to this, they go through this fight or flight response, not knowing what's happening to them. Usually they go to their doctors. Usually they get labeled as having some type of mental disorder. That's part of it. The other part is the isolation. It really looks like in the beginning, a decade ago, this was mostly experimentation. Um, and and time again, what would happen is these individuals would become very isolated because they're going and telling everyone what they believe is happening to them. Then everyone starts to distance themselves. So once they become more isolated, then particularly the psychic driving on steroids begins to happen. And for those of you who don't know what psychic driving is, Ewan Cameron was a Canadian psychiatrist hired by the US to do experimentation to see if you can erase someone's brain and reprogram it. And he would use a lot of methodologies, sleep deprivation, long-term sleep through drugging them. He would put a helmet on them and put recordings that would just be repetitive over and over again. So utilizing the law of repetition, which is used in hypnosis. He would use electric shock therapy, and he would use all these types of things. Now, the number one complaint of the Havana Syndrome federal employees was they were hearing unusual noise. So now they're getting this noise 24/7, 365 a year. So this is why I say it's basically psychic driving on steroids. So that's an issue. And once this is done, and you're telling everyone else, you become isolated. Now you start to have issues at work. You become unemployed, and so eventually you lose everything, and you're homeless. Now I've had, believe it or not, I've had judges come see me. I've had politicians, I've had attorneys, I've had doctors, and the gamut, white collar workers, blue collar workers, all the way down. And so when that's the whole construct, and that's typically what happens. Now there's a subset of high functioning people that are out there. Ton of physicians, a lot of physicians are out there that are high functioning. There's attorneys that are high functioning. And what I see tends to happen is that turns into a really long-term, low to moderate assault. And that was described by Lieutenant Colonel Ingren today. He says in those cases, those are the people that can't really be controlled. So the only hope is to make them look like they're crazy. So the thing that people need to be in fear of is how many people out there that this is happening to that have no clue that this even exists. What happens when it does? It happens. What happens when it starts? When they get a hold of a person in leadership, heaven forbid it be a president of a country. What are those scenarios? And this is why it's a national security issue. One aspect of it's a human rights issue for the general population. And what needs to happen most is there needs to be an avenue for resources. Here at Homeland Security, they're testifying there. The witnesses are testifying, and they're complaining, look, you guys put funding aside for all these federal employees, but nothing is being done with that funding. They can't even go see a doctor at the VA because they don't even have a medical code for Havana Syndrome. But yet you admit it's happening, but you're not helping. And this is our mission.
So, on an individual level, are there things people can do if they feel like they're being targeted? I've heard a number of modalities we've discussed over the years in plenty of episodes. One seems to be there's a guy who sells a CD that plays a specific frequency while you sleep, and it acts as that firewall. And people have had great success with that. Um, there's we've heard a number of people say that when you feel like you're being targeted, start singing a song, start singing, and sing out loud, and it actually somehow or scrambles the signal, and it'll actually, if you're having a rash breakout or whatever, it'll stop it sometimes if it actually is being if you are being directly targeted with a frequency. So is there anything else that you could recommend that people could do if they are experiencing this?
Okay. Well, recently we've come up with a couple of inventions. I'll talk about one. The other one I have to, and I'll disclose at a later date. We recently developed a way. Now, this signal that comes in, um, it's modulated, okay? And then it becomes demodulated after it hits the implant, and then it gets converted into a way that the brain can understand what is being transmitted. Okay, that's the layman's way of describing it. Now, that modulated signal that's coming in is around the frequency around 10 kilohertz to 11 kilohertz. It's a high pitch whine. And sometimes individuals describe it as someone's doing this with the volume, turning it up and down.
Mhm.
Okay. Now, that's not tinnitus. Tinnitus doesn't do that. Okay. Because most of the time you'll go to the doctor, complain about this unusual ringing, and then they just either you've got Meniere's disease or tinnitus, and that's usually the blanket diagnoses. We recently developed a way. Now hearing this 10 kilohertz to 11 kilohertz frequency 24/7 does not allow your brain to rest. And so you become sleep deprived, fatigued, and that causes all kinds of other issues. But we recently developed a way utilizing a frequency generator and a very inexpensive way, as long as you have noise canceling AirPods or a headset, we can teach you um, how to counter that modulated signal. Doesn't get rid of the demodulated message, but it does counter that modulated signal. And what's nice about it is as that signal changes in frequency hopping, you can change with it. And what it does, it allows your brain to rest, and you get to get a decent night's sleep, and you're not fatigued anymore.
Mm.
It gets rid of the brain fog, is what we've learned, and now we've tested it. I don't think I've had a failure with it yet.
Right.
So it's helped everyone so far who's tried it. But there is a way to do that. And if you have someone who's really in crisis and that's what they're complaining about, we can definitely help them with that and coach them on what needs to be done.
Will you be scanning people at the conference? Will you have an RF scanner, and will you be offering that?
Um, I thought about it, but it takes about to do a thorough scan. It takes about an hour and a half to 2 hours per scan.
Right.
So I'm probably not going to be able to do something like that
Sure.
at the event, because I'm going to also, as one of the managers, I need to make sure
Maybe
that
we'll just do you, Tyler.
flow is going right.
Well,
But Tyler,
Right, Jesse? Maybe we'll
if
just
you'd
do
like to,
Tyler.
I'd be more than happy to do that for you
no,
there.
I mean it's
There you
it's
go.
honestly, I would absolutely love that, because there are some things that happen that only this type of technology would explain. So if I could identify anything like that that at least set me in the right direction, that would be great. So
Yeah, yeah, and we have some resources for you, like depending on what we find, that we can guide you and coach you on what I would do next. Yeah.
right. Yeah. So, Desiree, Aaron, I mean, did you guys want to add anything to this before we start wrapping it up? I mean, this is a heavy subject and we could go on and on forever about this because we're only really touching the surface of it right now. But did you want to add anything, Desiree?
No, I'm good. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, of course. And Aaron, did you have any last questions before we wrap it up?
Well, I just thank you for the work you're doing because, you know, this is obviously gets labeled in the box of conspiracy, obviously, right? Because
Yeah.
this stuff doesn't happen. This is crazy conspiracy. People are just crazy if they think this is happening, and that's what they want you to think, right? Because then you can just write it off and no one
That's
takes
the
it
whole-
seriously, and then it
It's the
never
whole
gets dealt with.
construct.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
what they're banking on, right? So thank you for talking about this. Thank you for doing all the work you've been doing to prove that this is happening and to get help for the people that it's happening to massive, massive things that need to be done. And the more people that wake up to this, that understand this is real, this is happening, and what can we do about it, you know, that's I feel like we're on that trajectory now, and you know, and obviously that's just one thing. There's so much manipulation happening in our world today, as we know, with agendas and not things that aren't good for humanity that, you know, they want to keep doing in the shadows, right? Well, the more we
Yeah.
can wake up, the less they're able to do that, and we can start
Right.
taking our power back, you know. So thank you for the work you're doing.
Yeah,
No
absolutely.
problem. You know, I'd rather serve others than serve myself. That's why I was a firefighter paramedic. That's why I do what I do. And enlightenment education is the number one defense. This is why we're doing the Mind Nexus live event in Tucson, Arizona on the 27th through the 29th. I was the idea and the concept was to bring a plethora of experts together in different fields so that we can start to educate the general population, not just those who live this every day and sort of get clustered into their own group. It's important that we educate everyone and understand that if we don't stop this now, if we don't create resources for everyone who is victimized this way, that we're in for trouble. Just think, do you want this to happen to your brother, your sister, your mother, your father, your grandparents, your children, your family, your friends? This is devastating. I have seen time and time again, like I said, uh, doctors have these $1 million practices just lose it all, only because they go to take the traditional route. Now, I'm not discouraging anyone. If you have an issue and it's a medical issue, by all means, you need to see your doctor. But don't tell them your theory. Just give them your symptoms. They're the professionals. They're the ones who are supposed to come up with a diagnosis for you. Now, if you think this is happening to you and you want to get an RF scan or a nonlinear junction scan, by all means, reach out and we'll guide you in the right direction.
And where can they find you? Where can they reach out to?
Just reach out at mynexuslive.com. You can reach us there at the website or cosmicclarityconnections.org. And you can just go info@cosmicclarityconnections.org, and we're more than happy to guide you in the right direction. Also, if you're curious about your suggestibility and where you fall, if you go to the website, there's a link up at the top that says suggestibility, and for free, it will take you through a couple of quizzes, and it'll give you your suggestibility score. If you fall into the highly suggestible, it'll automatically flag us and we will reach out to you.
Wow.
It's a small minority. Okay.
I'm going to try that.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
I think at some point in our lives, we were all highly suggestible before we learned about this stuff. So, yeah, that's very important. And I just wanted to also let our audience know there is a discount code right now. Am I correct about that for the conference? MindNexGo, MindNexGO is the discount code, and that will give you a discounted ticket through July 15th, correct?
That is correct.
So tickets are $444, and with the discount code, the ticket becomes $374. and that's a great deal. And so it's a 3-day event, correct? It's
Correct.
Dinner
okay.
included.
3
Yeah.
two catered dinners, and
DJ.
we'll give you an opportunity with the DJ so you can mingle with all of the speakers and get to network with like-minded minds and ask more questions and get answers that you're looking for.
Right. I think Desiree is more excited about the DJ than the conference. He keeps bringing it up.
I know, right? I got to hire the DJ. That's
Right.
my one job.
Nice.
Nice.
Yeah, so thank you so much for joining us. And guys, if you want to hear Desiree's testimony, episode 22, I don't know how cringe that might be looking back on that
An
now.
old one.
We were all amateurs back then, but I remember it being a great episode, actually, and I've even referenced that interview in our Voice of God webinar, which was the only one that somehow didn't make the YouTube purge. It's the only video of everything we have that we lost, of course.
We're planning on redoing it.
Yeah.
So we can have it again.
But there's been so much more that's been coming to the surface about this technology and just notes I've been taking over time that we can add to it and really revamp that thing and just bring new awareness and play our part. So we'll be doing that. But yeah, go ahead. Were you going to say something, Jesse?
There is one thing. There is a video that I put in that file by William Pollock. He worked on making these chips, and he didn't want to release that video until after he passed away because he didn't want to get arrested. But he discloses everything about that and how they made billions of them in Silicon Valley and they disappeared. They have no idea where they went. It's important also that your listeners look at that video.
So is this the file you sent me? Is this something that you would be okay with us sharing with our audience, everything that's in it?
Yeah, it's on my OneDrive, but you have access to it.
Right.
And I have no problem with you sharing that.
Okay. Yeah,
Okay.
We'll see how much time I have for editing and stuff, but we'll definitely put the key stuff in there in the description and steer people in the right direction, because that's huge, actually, having a testimony of somebody who made the chips, because we don't think about that. We were the people making them. It was kind of reminds me of the Montauk guys that were blowing the whistle on, hey, we were the ones fracturing people's minds and this is how we did it, So you don't typically hear from those guys because they've been silenced. So that's a really interesting testimony. I'd like to look into more. So yeah, thank you guys so much. And we hope to see all of you guys at the conference. Aaron and I, like I said, we'll be there. It's a great lineup. And it's September 27th through the 29th, Tucson, Arizona, mindnexuslive.com, right?
Correct.
That's correct.
And grab your ticket and come hang out. It's going to be a great time, and it's going to be a nice weather in Arizona there at that time, I would believe. I don't know. Maybe it might be hot. I have no idea, but
it'll be a little hot.
Yeah, it'll be hotter than where we're at, but
yeah,
it won't be July degrees.
Yeah, it'll be a little hot. It'll still be in the hundreds.
It'll still, it'll still be.
Well, then I lied. It's going to be hot, but still come out.
No humidity though. No humidity.
Come hang out
Dry
anyway.
heat. We're used to the humidity.
Right.
Actually, a lot nicer.
Yeah, this was amazing. Thank you, Jesse. You're a wealth of knowledge. I mean,
no problem.
You know your stuff, and clearly you're the right guy to be behind this and involved with this project. So we're definitely honored to be a part of it, and we can't wait to see you guys there in person. So until next time, guys, we love you all. We can't do this without you. And just a quick reminder, if you haven't signed up for our Patreon yet, it's only $5 a month. And an upcoming webinar is going to be on the secret journey to Planet Serpo or Project Serpo or Project Crystal Night, whatever you'd like to call it. But it's a very interesting topic. It's one of the ones that actually got us. It was one of the early ones that caught my attention and kind of in the early days of my awakening. So we're going to do a deep dive. We realized Aaron and I just recently visited Devil's Tower, and there's a connection there, which we'll talk about. But we realized not a lot of people actually know about what happened and under Kennedy's watch. And this might have been another reason he was assassinated. So we're going to do a deep dive there. And that link is below in the description as well. So sign up for the Patreon if you haven't. And until next time, have a great evening. We love you. Good night.
Ladies and gentlemen, the very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies to secret oaths and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it.
Our constitutional journey did not stop then, and it must not stop now, Judge. And we'll be faced with equally consequential decisions in the 21st century. Can a microscopic tag be implanted in a person's body to track his every movement? There's actual discussion about that. You will rule on that, mark my words, before your tenure is over.
Dr. Francis Collins is the director of the National Institutes of Health.
Let me just say a word, though, about neuroimaging. Certainly the problem of incidental findings, though, is an enormous, obvious overlap with the genetic situation. MRI scans often give things you didn't expect, and often they're things you don't know what to do with. UBOs, they're called unidentified bright objects. Do you want to have one of those in your brain? Well, you might, and what are you going to do with that?
Can brain scans be used to determine whether a person is inclined toward criminality or violent behavior? You will rule on that.
Getting again into forensics, lie detection, certainly there are those who believe this will become a more accurate means of assessing when somebody is practicing deception and then other available methods.
And Judge, I need to know whether you will be a justice who believes that the constitutional journey must continue to speak to these consequential decisions, or that we've gone far enough in protecting against government intrusion into our autonomy, into the most personal decisions we make. Judge, that's why this is a critical moment.
Personality prediction or profiling, again, something that might be used in making decisions about who gets access to which particular kinds of jobs or in the military, or also could be used in courts of law. Neuromarketing, a little scary concept there, trying to assess when people are responding effectively to certain kinds of advertising or
Security Subcommittee on Counterterrorism, Law Enforcement, and Intelligence will come to order. The purpose of this hearing is to receive testimony from expert witnesses from the national security realm that will inform our understanding of anomalous health incidents, or more commonly known as Havana Syndrome. I now recognize myself for an opening statement. Good afternoon and welcome to the Subcommittee on Counterterrorism, Law Enforcement, and Intelligence. We're holding this important hearing to examine anomalous health incidents, otherwise known as AHIs or Havana Syndrome, and discuss the potential targeting of U.S. government officials and their families in the homeland and elsewhere. Although this issue has recently gained significant media attention, the issues surrounding anomalous health incidents or Havana Syndrome are not new. Dating back to 2014, a number of U.S. diplomatic, military, and intelligence officials and their families have reported major medical symptoms that have affected their auditory and sensory motor skills. These issues became public in late 2016 after a group of Canadian diplomats and U.S. government employees and their families assigned to the U.S. Embassy in Havana, Cuba, began experiencing similar symptoms. After the reported incidents in Havana, government officials and their families began reporting similar symptoms in the People's Republic of China, Vietnam, Germany, Austria, Serbia, Australia, Taiwan, Colombia, as well as here in the United States.
Examine the anomalous health incidents affecting a range of U.S. national security personnel, including intelligence officials, members of our armed forces, and diplomats. Sometimes referred as Havana Syndrome, anomalous health incidents were first reported, as the chairman suggested, back in 2014 by U.S. personnel assigned to our embassy in Havana. Many have described the symptoms that were chronic and debilitating. Sadly, these incidents have not been isolated to Havana. U.S. personnel have reported such incidents as Hanoi, Vienna, London, Moscow, as well as here in the United States, in Washington, D.C., Virginia, and Pennsylvania.
Chairman, ranking members, congressmen. It is an honor to speak with you today and give voice to the unseen, the U.S. government, AHI survivors, and their families. My name is Greg Edgreen. I stood up and led the DIA's task force, which was in charge of taking care of our survivors and determining the cause. For background, I'm not an analyst. I'm a retired Army and intelligence officer. The following are my personal opinions and do not represent the opinions of the government. Given the classification of this topic, many of my comments will have to be made at a future closed-door session. As a country, we have been here before. Most people think this all started in Havana in 2016, the widely reported Havana Syndrome. This led to the U.S. withdrawing most of its staff and ending rapprochement between Havana and Washington. But before Havana Syndrome, there was the Moscow Signal. Soviet intelligence bathed the U.S. Embassy in Moscow with microwave transmissions. The health effects were similar to what we see today. There are many examples of syndromes and ailments from Americans injured in the line of duty that the government did not recognize for many years, which were eventually proven. Agent Orange used in Vietnam, the Gulf War syndrome, burn pits during the forever wars of Iraq and Afghanistan. In all of these examples, America took too long to acknowledge these injuries, and our service members languished without care. Havana Syndrome is no different. The gaslighting of AHI survivors continues to this day as history repeats itself. Throughout all this, I learned America's best men and women in national security are being targeted and neutralized in a global campaign. AHIs have been reported in the press in every continent except for Antarctica, with a large percentage of these attacks occurring in the homeland, in American, in this town.
Disturbing. Before I get to my questions, I just want to reiterate that we're going to do everything we can to assure that the victims, those that are suffering, will receive consistent health care for what is ailing you. But, Mr. Edgren, the evidence, no intentional attack, yet what I'm hearing from Mr. Zaid, Mr. Grozov, is that there's a possibility that something is out there attacking us, especially in Homeland. Mr. Edgren, based on what Mr. Zaid just said, what are your thoughts?
My personal thoughts?
As an intelligence officer.
Is that I agree with them. My personal opinions is that this is a global campaign, and it includes attacking us here at home. It is a strategic issue that is going to impact us.
Is this a attack by the Russians, just the Russians, and is it against the U.S. solely or other allies as well?
I have to be careful what I say here. So let me say this.
And if I can, say what you can. If you gentlemen feel better talking about this in a more secure setting,
I'll start by saying this.
We can work on that as well.
Congressman, thank you for the question. Give me 20 minutes in a skiff and I'll convince all of you. I know where the bodies are buried. I know the cabinets to look in, the questions to ask, and the people to subpoena. I will say that this is a global campaign and it's focused on attacking our people, the best of our people. It's not the middle-range people that are being attacked. It's those that are succeeding and providing work that winds up on the president's desk every morning. So it's a massive issue. It's something that doesn't come to light, and it's something that, especially with the Department of Defense survivors, the unseen, they're totally left out of this because the Havana Act doesn't cover your active duty members. They're told to go to the VA, but there's no VA diagnostic code, so we're not getting them care. It's not consistent. We have funding available that's allocated that we could provide to take care of all of our people in our government. We're not using it. That's why I would urge you to contact the Defense Health Program.
Government action recognizing this issue. You compare this to Agent Orange and some of the other ailments our military personnel have suffered, and it takes decades to acknowledge that, yes, this is an issue, it's a medical issue to be taken care of, to be treated on a long-term basis. It's kind of where we started today. I think that I agree with you and with the chairman and Mr. Swalwell, who worked on this issue for a long time, that we do have to take care of the victims the best we can. Now we're shifting to something else, which is essentially a cover-up. What you all are saying is there's a government cover-up of the fact that something is out there afflicting, targeting us. Is this where we're going with this?
Thank you. Great points. I won't get into classification of the problems. I will tell you that the government in the IC assessment is wrong. It's dead wrong. I can't tell you if it's a cover-up, why they're doing this, malfeasance. I won't go there. What I can tell you is that it's my firm belief we already have attribution. Right now is the time for action, retribution, and we need to prioritize taking care of our people, because there's a lot of survivors and their families that have been attacked here in the homeland that are in a long wait line to get to Walter Reed because we're not executing funding that's already been allocated by you gentlemen to take care of these survivors. You fix Walter Reed and the Defense Health Program, everyone benefits.
Mr. Zaid.
So, sir, I've been working in the national security field for 30 years, representing some of our most covert intelligence officers, who I respect a great deal, and the agencies. The word cover-up, I will tell you that there are many legitimate reasons why there could be what the agencies are doing, to explain why they are doing it. What I will tell you is
would you
that
say,
the public
would you use a cover-up as a statement or other words?
So cover-up would depend on intent. There could be good reasons to withhold information. I will say that the public statements that the executive branch is making is inconsistent with the classified record. And
I think you should refer that last question to the FBI and classified spaces.
yeah, obviously the episode with my client, an active FBI agent that was authorized to speak to 60 Minutes, talks about an incident in Key West, and most of that information is either law enforcement sensitive or classified.
Are any of you aware of any reported incidents from individuals who are not members of the United States government, domestically, I should say?
I am not, but I will throw a caveat in there. Generally, I only focused on former and current government employees that were attacked.
Mr. Zaid, are you?
There are many people who believe they are victims of AHIs. All you have to do is look at my Twitter feed whenever I post on the topic. I only represent federal government employees and their families, so I don't focus on the accuracy of those particular claims.
And Mr. Grozev, do you have any insight?
Not on American soil, but in other parts of the world, there have been complaints that appear to be credible from Russian activists or Russian opposition leaders living abroad.
If your assessments here are correct, these are very covert weapons, aren't they? They don't leave behind bomb fragments, bullet holes, etc. They could absolutely be used by our adversaries and have very low levels of, very easy to deny that they were even there, that they were used. Is that correct?
That's correct. There's no entry or exit wound. How they're designed is to make the target feel like they're crazy, like they're imagining things, especially on the low duration, the low intensity, long duration hits.
There's one simple dental hack anyone can do to rebuild gums and teeth and never see a dentist again. People are healing decay and repairing damaged